Hi, Sandia-based readers. I am so glad you checked in on my library page because I am excited to continue reading The Wild Robot Escapes. And I know Miss Hudson and Miss Byers' class were reading this book, and I believe we were about at the same point. But if anyone is interested in the Wild Robot series, I highly recommend you start with The Wild Robot, obviously, first, and then move on to The Wild Robot Escapes. And I don't want to give too much away, so spoiler alert, I'll be giving a review of what happened in the first book and what we last read in this book. The Wild Robot Escapes is written by one of my favorite authors, Peter Brown. And in this book, he talks about a robot who crashes up onto this deserted island along with a bunch of other crates full of robots. And she doesn't know how she got there, why she's there, or what her purpose is. But some animals discover how to turn her on, and she discovers how to survive on that island, and by communicating with the animals and learning their survival techniques like camouflage and mimicry. And she even adopts a little gosling son who ends up growing up to be quite an amazing character who helps her make friends with all the other animals on the island, and goes on an amazing migratory adventure and comes back to discover that his mother's in serious trouble because his mother, the robot, is now being looked for by, we're not sure quite who is looking for her, but these Rico robots come to the island to try to bring her back. And all of the animals band together and fight the robots off, but even though they've won that small battle, Roz, the robot, knows that she has to leave the island if she wants to keep her animal friends and her gosling son safe. And she's determined to leave and then figure out a way to come back and escape back to the island. And in The Wild Robot Escapes, that's where the story picks up, as she discovers she has been refitted with brand new arms and legs, because when we saw her at the end of the last book, she was only just a head and a broken torso, and she was barely able to make it back onto the ship. When she gets back to the world that created her, she discovers that she is a farm robot, and she takes instructions very well, and she is bought to work on a farm, the Sharif farm, where she meets those two children. And the children at first just think she's a fun plaything, but they grow to trust her and love her as she tells them stories of which are imaginary stories at first for the kids, but then they discover that those stories are real, that she really did have a life on an island and many animal friends, and needs to get back to her son and to the family and friends that she loves so much. And she has been reunited with her son, who has come during his migratory path and has figured out where his mother has been on which farm. And Bright Bill comes looking for his mother robot on the farm, and they meet and they have this wonderful reunion. "The goose in Roz's arms," said Jaya to her brother. "That must be her son." All of Roz's stories came flooding back to the children. The robot, the island, the wild animals, the adventures. Those stories seemed so fanciful. Could they really be true? "You are correct, children. Those robot stories are about me," admitted Roz with a hint of sadness in her voice. "There were so many times that I wanted to tell you the truth about my past, but I was afraid. The truth would frighten you." The robot motioned to the goose in her arms. "This is my son. His name is Brightbill." Reader, there's another important quality that children possess. In addition to being sneaky and smart, they're also compassionate. Children care about others and about the world, and as Jaya and Jad gazed at Roz and Brightbill, their hearts were full of compassion. "Please do not tell your father about me," said Roz. "To him I am just a machine. If he learns the truth, he will send me back to the robot factory, where I will be destroyed. But you must do what you feel is right. My life is in your hands now." The children looked at each other and smiled. "Don't worry, Roz," said Jaya. "Your secret is safe with us." They are trying to help her now to escape. They have to figure out a way for her to get off the farm without anyone noticing that she has gone off of the tracking system. So they come up with a plan to help the robot escape. The plan is that they are going to remove the transmitter that's inside of the robot's body. And to do that, they need to perform surgery on the robot late at night when no one can see them. They're not really sure how it's going to go, but they decide that they need to take the chance. Hopefully, once her transmitter is removed, she can leave the farm undetected. They take her apart, and she's just a mess. And at first, they can't put her back together. Are you okay? Can you speak? Said Jaya. Roz shook her head. She can't speak. We must have put something back in the wrong place, and then they have to do it all over again. And after hours of trial and error, and with morning light seeping into the barn, they finally do it. They remove the transmitter. After being trapped on Hilltop Farm for nearly a year, Roz was now free to run away any time she liked. But without Brightbill to guide her, she wouldn't make it far. So the robot patiently waited for spring to come, and for her son to return so they could begin their long journey home together. I'm skipping ahead a little bit to chapter 46, the spring. With each passing day, the sun climbed a little higher and its rays grew a little warmer. The last patches of snow melted away and color returned to the land. The pasture, the fields, the trees, they were all turning bright green, and the air slowly filled with the fresh smells of spring. Many of the cows had been steadily growing bigger, and now calving season had arrived. When the time was right, each cow went to the pasture so her calf could be born in soft grass. The robot stood nearby just in case anyone needed her help, but nobody ever did. Even the first-time mothers knew what to do instinctively, and soon newborn calves were frolicking around the farm. Spring was a happy, exciting time, and yet Roz was distracted. More and more, she found herself looking to the skies, hoping to see Brightbill and his flock. She knew they were on their way. Chapter 47, the dinner. Mr. Sharif hopped out of the truck with his arms full of shopping bags. He limped toward the farmhouse, dragging his leg in the usual way, and then he fell. Roz ran over and found the man sprawled on the driveway, groceries scattered around him. "Are you okay?" she said, pulling him to his feet. "I'm fine," he grumbled. Roz started picking up the groceries and said, "Let me help you inside." A minute later, the two of them were stepping into the house. Jackets and hats hung from pegs on the wall. Shoes were lined up beneath the bench. The man peeled off his boots and hollered, "Kids, it's time to cook dinner." Footsteps pounded across the ceiling, and the children came flying down the staircase with their dog. "Is Roz having dinner with us?" said Jaya. "Roz doesn't eat," said Jad. "I know that, but she could sit with us." "How about it, Roz?" said Mr. Sharif. "Care to join us for dinner?" The family smiled at the robot. "What would you like me to do?" said Roz. In a very proper voice, Jad said, "I would greatly enjoy the pleasure of your company for dinner." In a very improper voice, Jaya said, "I order you to stay for dinner." The children didn't wait for a response. They snatched the groceries from Roz and scampered off. Oscar ran after them, barking, "Is that food? It smells like food. I want food." Remember, Roz can understand animals. The children didn't. The floor wood creaked as Roz followed Mr. Sharif through the living room. The comfy chair and a sofa faced a darkening electronic screen. Above the fireplace hung a painting of a familiar old barn. Doorways led to other rooms. Roz glanced into Mr. Sharif's office and saw a portrait of his family, including his wife. Mrs. Sharif was pretty, with wild, dark, curly hair and a bright smile. It was the same smile Roz saw in the children. "Look, Jaya's crying like a baby," came Jad's jiggly voice from the kitchen. When Roz walked in, the girl was chopping an onion with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Roz, I order you to chop this onion for me," she said, wiping her eyes. The robot picked up a knife, and in a flash, the onion was perfectly chopped and dumped into a bowl. Clearly, Roz was designed to chop onions. "Roz, I order you to take the night off," Mr. Sharif laughed. "The kids and I want to cook. We enjoy it." More vegetables were chopped, skillets started sizzling, delicious aromas swirled together, and before long a magnificent meal was set on the dinner table. Oscar positioned himself below to catch scraps of food, and everyone else took a seat. Mr. Sharif turned to his daughter. "Would you like to say grace?" The girl lowered her head. "Thank you, God, for this yummy food we're about to gobble down. Amen." Thank you, Jaya, said Mr. Sharif with a wink. And thank you, Roz, for everything you've done this past year. I had my doubts, but now I can't imagine what we'd do without you. The children looked at each other. Then the family grabbed their knives and forks and dug into dinner. A colorful leafy salad, a plate of sautéed asparagus, creamy mashed potatoes and buttered bread and tall glasses of milk. The meal was beautiful, but as Roz scanned the table, her eyes kept returning to the roasted chicken. It was about the size of Brightbill. Suddenly, the robot was full of questions. Do chickens live happy lives? Did this chicken know it would be eaten? Were humans bad for eating animals? No, thought Roz. Humans are simply following their instincts, like all creatures, like Roz herself. At least the Sharifs honored this animal by giving thanks and by turning it into a beautiful, nourishing meal. After he'd finished eating, Mr. Sharif stepped out of the room, and he returned a moment later carrying a violin and a bow. Growing up, I dreamed of being a musician, he said, thumping back into his chair. He tuned the instrument, put it under his chin, and started to play. His bow glided back and forth, his fingers danced across the strings, and a lovely old folk song filled the room. Mr. Sharif tapped his foot as the notes rang out, soft and then loud, loud and then fast. The song ended with a flourish, and the music faded to silence. Then he rested the violin on his knee. This instrument has been in our family for a very long time, he said, since the days when Cyrus Sharif first built the farm. Cyrus Sharif? Roz knew that name. She unsnapped a pocket on her tool belt and pulled out the small journal. I discovered this in the old barn, she said, handing it over. The children huddled around their father as he took the journal. They read their ancestor's name on the cover. Then they carefully opened it and turned the brittle pages. I've never seen this journal before, said Mr. Sharif. This is a piece of our family history. Kids, look at how they used to milk cows. Roz left the Sharifs like that, examining the journal, learning about their family's history. But what about their family's future? Their lives were difficult. They needed help, and Roz was about to run away forever. As she marched back to the barn that night, the robot felt something like worry and confusion and guilt. Chapter 48, The Return. The robot's feelings of worry and confusion and guilt went away as soon as she heard her son's voice echoing across the farm. Ma, we're back! Brightbill's flock appeared above the pasture, flapping and honking and laughing. They glided down to Roz, and Brightbill took his place on his mother's shoulder. I told you we'd keep your son out of trouble, squawked Loudwing. Thank you, everyone, the robot spoke in her most cheerful voice. It is so good to see all of you again. The cows trotted over, grinning and happily mooing to the geese. While the herd and the flock caught up with each other, Roz and Brightbill slipped away to speak privately. What's the plan, Ma? Said Brightbill. The plan is simple, said Roz. Tonight, under the cover of darkness, I will run away from this farm, and then you and I will begin our journey home. Chapter 49, The Goodbyes. You'll have to tune in with me next week, or later on this week, to see if we can complete more of The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. I wish I could see each and every one of you in person. We could talk about what's happening in this book. I so much enjoyed our first Wild Robot, and I hope that this book turns out to be just as enjoyable for you. So please remember, email me, come and chat with me, send me your comments, and I hope to see you here very soon. Take care, everybody.